do now is really just introduce our speaker for tonight and our special guest, and it's the lovely Jo Carroll. And Jo is a Melbourne-based abstract artist. You know, after a very successful career in global advertising and global advertising agencies, Jo really got serious about painting. And in 2016, she really decided to focus her energy and her passion on following her own inner calling. Today, Jo's art is calming, it's meditative, it's born out of her passion to really create from nothing and to really capture the imagination of the viewer. And her paintings are often scenic, atmospheric, ethereal, and often take the viewer into the painting experience on an inner journey. What you'll also find out tonight is Jo is a Reiki master as well, and Reiki and her spiritual life also had a big impact on her journey of making that shift from the corporate world to what she does now, which is really living and following her inner vision and her true calling. So without further ado, I'm going to just bring Jo onto the screen. So let's give Jo a big round of applause as we welcome Jo. Fantastic, Jo,
Hi,
and thank you for
so
joining
much.
us. It's great to have
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
That's right. It's great to have you with us, and nice to see a bit of your art in the background, which I know we'll be talking about. But I'm going to hand over to Ella, and Ella's going to be taking us through and just really opening up the conversation tonight. It is a fireside chat, so wherever we go intuitively, that's where we'll go. So everybody, hang on for the journey. Over to you, Ella.
Welcome, Jo.
Thank you.
I know Jo from around 11 years, and we are very good friends. And she was one of my first clients. And this is such a privilege to watch you growing and to watch you on your spiritual journey. And the way I see your life, and you went through 3 big shifts, and I classify in 3 stages. One is to get your job in corporate. So I believe it was your dream. You study and you were very successful in corporate world, and you build up your family. The stage 2, I see Jo who awakened and decided to align her energy with Reiki and step into Reiki mastery. And the 3rd, I see contemporary artist. And I am so proud of you. So let's talk about your journey, Jo. What did you learn from working in the corporate field?
Yes, well, gosh, that's a big question to answer, but I learned a lot. And, you know, to take a step back before that, my dream as a child was to be an artist. And I think I'm not the only child to have that dream. It's a very common dream. But of course, my parents said, no, you can't do that. And you have to have a more practical career. And so I took their advice and I took a more commercial approach. And I had a dream of them becoming a graphic designer. And then didn't get into my first university choice, and I got into creative advertising instead, which I later found out was actually a really hard course to get into. And then I fell into this world of advertising, which I didn't really know until I fell into it. But I loved it. I really enjoyed it so much. And I learned so much. And the wonderful thing about working in that industry is that you get to work across all industries. So you don't go deep into topic, but you go wide. So I got to meet a lot of different people. I got to learn about a lot of different topics. It makes it way easier to have conversations at dinner parties or functions because you know a little bit about every industry, so you can relate to people, which is nice. But then there was always this niggle about the art, and it never really left me. And I would pick up paintbrushes every now and then, put them down, pick them up. But I never really had the right space or set up and didn't really know what to paint. And so it was kind of like I'd play. But then, and that was enough to satisfy me for a long time. But I never took it seriously. It was always just like a fun thing to do. And then um, I had my second child, Eden, who at the time, and I was coming to see you a lot at that time, Ella, because I had concerns about Eden and his development. And then it was actually another person recommended doing Reiki. And then I remember calling you and saying, I want to do Reiki and I'll do whatever it takes to help heal my son. And so you recommended and I think I was actually, it was within the next couple of days, I was doing my Reiki 1. And it was during that process where my psychic gate was opened that then a few weeks later, I found that I had to paint. So it became a compulsion and I couldn't stop. And it was this really beautiful, I guess, surprising, unexpected delight of being attuned. And then I just wanted to do more. So I got my level 2, and shortly after I got my master. But I just want to clarify, I'm not a master of Reiki. I'm just a Reiki master. So it's never been something which I've practiced apart for myself personally. But it's really helped open up my creative energy and let it flow, and to not even think about what I'm going to paint, but just to allow whatever's coming through, whatever messages are coming through, whatever needs to be visually portrayed on the canvas to come through. And it's something I'll always be grateful for having that experience. And I'm not sure whether it would have happened if I hadn't have done the Reiki. I don't know, but it's been pretty special.
So thank you, Joe. So you always felt the calling, and it was your passion. However, you overrode with the logic because
Oh, yes.
because of the financial reason, yes. And from what I'm actually getting, that Reiki put you back on your pathway where you belong from such a long time, and made you also more trusty in faith. So I remember you stop worrying what's gonna happen. It's just you let it flow, and probably that was the biggest shift you had. Well, I assume. Is it
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, I would say so. And look, I think that that's true of how I create my work too, because before I did Reiki, I would try to paint, but I'd be like, what am I making? And does that look good? And what materials do I use? And is the composition right? And and it's funny to watch now when I run workshops with people, especially the very left brain people. It's always the doctors, the lawyers, the scientists that come into the workshop. And I say, okay, you need to just stop thinking. Like, don't worry about it. Just put
It's
the
not
paint
easy.
on. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no right, there's no wrong. They're like, but it has to be like they try to bring the logic in. And so I feel like, having that experience with Reiki has been out. And one of the rules of Reiki, of course, is do not worry, which is
Yes.
easier said than done. But it's an amazing place to sit in when you're free. It's like, yeah, I don't have to worry. I can just be.
So when did you make a decision actually to shift completely from the corporate field to become a contemporary artist?
Well, I think I made the decision a few years ago, but it took me a while to implement. So it's one of those things that, and look, I was in a really fortunate position in corporate because I had a very senior role and I was on a really good wicket. So I had a lot to give up, and it wasn't something I was wanting to give up, like from a financial perspective, that easily. And so for me, I had to do it gradually to make sure that I wasn't giving up, my career. And then the next day I'm trying to set up a business and, trying to get things going and make art sales. And, I did it part-time to begin with. And because painting was like my yoga, I guess. So rather than the weekends, spending the time catching up with friends or going out or doing yoga or Pilates or whatever it may be, I would paint. That was my thing. And as soon as the kids went to bed, I'd paint. And then all day on Saturday, I'd paint, and most of Sunday too. And so then I was starting to sell through some exhibitions here and there, starting to make some money. And I was starting to sort of get the wheels in motion, like get all of the foundations of the business set up. And then when I finally convinced my husband that it was time to have baby number 3, I planned that my maternity leave would be my, I guess my runway to maybe looking at doing this full time. But of course, it had been 7 years since I'd had the second child, and I'd completely forgotten actually how much hard work a baby is. And so it took me a while in the first 12 months to really get going. And then we were in COVID, so that was a whole other matter altogether. But then I took another 12 months off. So I had a whole 2 years of maternity leave, which was great because that was like my testing time. And so I managed to prove, yes, I think this is going to be okay and I think I can do it. But I still went back for a little while and I got my long service leave and my payout and all that sort of stuff. And that was when I could then fund my, getting a gallery space, getting a proper studio. So I was, look, it happened in a really nice way for me. And I didn't really orchestrate it or plan it. It just kind of happened that way, which was lovely. But what became really apparent when I did go back for that period of time after having so much time off was I couldn't stay in corporate. Like it just,
You didn't belong there.
I didn't belong there anymore, because I'd made the decision that I was going to move on. And look, the decision really was my retirement plan because I sort of thought it's going to take me a long time. But then when it all sort of happened, I was like, you know what? Like it's happening now. This is just, I'm retiring early. So, and that's what I kind of feel like. I've been so blessed because I love doing what I do. I'm not one to sit around and, just relax or read a book. I have to be active. I have to be doing things. I have to be creating things. So yeah, it's been a really nice journey.
Watching your transition, it was just beautiful, time for you and your family, and you just slide from one to another without any, huge changes.
Yeah.
So that was really beautiful. And then, as you know, I admire every painting of yours and try to read from every angle. I just love your painting. And we discussed this before quite a few times, but obviously creation, it's channeling, it's a pure channeling, yes? So how do you feel once you're in the mode? So are you actually, well, I have 2 questions and then I'm going to hand it over to Les.
Okay.
So are you waiting for the moment to be impressed? Or you just have schedule, but okay, I'm going to studio and I'm going to be working from 10 to 3 and just take a paint and you do whatever you want to do. You trust something will come through.
Yeah. It's probably a bit of both. So, because of my tight schedule, because of having 3 kids, I usually just do the drop-offs in the morning and then I'm in here by about 9:15. And then I just do as much as I can. And I don't have a computer here, apart from tonight, of course, but I just have my paints. And so I create as much as I can until it's time to wash everything up, pack away, and go and get the kids. And then I get home and that's my admin time. So, or it's usually, after school activities or homework or, whatever happens to be thrown at me at the time. But I try to at least get a couple of hours of admin in because half of the job of being an artist is actually like maybe like that's the painting is half of it and the rest of it's like the marketing, the logistics, the customer service, updating the website, whatever it is, getting photographs done. There's so much to it. So that's kind of how I structure my day. But what I try to do, and I especially try to do this in January every year, is I allow myself to play. And I try to, get into that more that meditative state and channel the work. But then I also go through this phase of that's not working, that's not like my logic slips in a lot. Because I'm conscious of, oh my gosh, I'm just poured, $200 of paint on this canvas and it still doesn't look any good. And then I have to trust that eventually it will look good. Because I try and play with new techniques and things. So, but then of course I get a commission from someone and they say, I want this color palette, I like this style, I want this size. Then I'm working to a brief, which is totally fine. And I love doing that. But that's obviously a less intuitive process. And so I'm not channeling so much. I'm really just making a piece which is for someone. And then there's times where I'm actually making a piece for someone and they've said, just whatever comes, they've given me a lot of freedom. And it's like I'm tuning into them and their energy. And that's actually a really beautiful way to create art. And even I try to think about what's the title that this work needs to be and what message that needs to send to someone and what resonates with them. So yeah, it just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no process. I just let it come as it comes.
Thank you, Jo. Les, do you have any questions?
I do, yes, thank you. And that's great to hear about your little process of creating and bringing things through. Jo, for yourself, obviously you said painting had always been something that'd been in the background, like an inner calling for you. But in order to make that decision, because I know there's some people who get called creatively to write a book or to go and be a speaker or to develop their mediumship. What resistance, was there any resistance that you experienced on the path, and how did you overcome that?
Yes, there's always resistance. Occasionally it creeps back in. It took me, I think, a good couple of years to actually get over imposter syndrome. Like that was a really big thing for me. And it's kind of like, you have a certain way of being viewed by the world, like a status and a lot of it's obviously tied into your ego. But I had a certain identity and I was shifting into a new identity and it was a big shift. So as much as I wanted to call myself an artist, it was challenging for me to really do that with confidence, especially around people who I was exhibiting with who had maybe 10 or 20 years of experience as an artist. And I kind of felt like I was intruding in their territory, like, who am I to be here? So that was a challenge, absolutely. The other challenge was just getting to know a whole new industry. So whilst I know a lot about advertising and marketing, and I was able to really, I guess, fast track my success in selling my work, there was a lot to learn about technique, about how to approach galleries, how to curate shows, what sort of lighting worked best with my work, other technical skills around like finishing the work, framing the work, distribution internationally, all that kind of stuff, which, it takes time to get your head around how to best like operate as a business. So yeah, that was challenging as well. And then there's moments where you feel like, oh my God, no one's bought my art for a month, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like, is my art any good? Like, no one's bought it for a little while. So what's going on? And then what happens is, I'll have make 5 or 6 sales in a week, and then I'm like, oh no, we're all good now. I'm like, right, this is the right track. So
It's an important aspect, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's a
Because
roller coaster.
we think it's going to be a straight line sometimes from here to where we want to be, but you're going to have those moments where, like you
No.
said, there may not be people coming in or sales, and then there's other periods where we do have that, and you really have to kind of rely on your own inner, I suppose, own inner strength around the dream or the
Yeah,
vision, and yeah. So that's interesting.
absolutely. And like I could be working on So I was just going to say, I could be working on a piece of art for several days and it looks no good. And so it's in those moments where you just have to push through because you know eventually it's going to be good. But it's painful feeling like you're spending all this time and getting nowhere and getting nowhere. And then all of a sudden you do that last 10% and it's like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think like that is kind of the life of an artist.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And just one more question, because you've just reminded me of something we chatted about a couple of weeks ago. And I thought it was a great metaphor for life. But you mentioned obviously with art and what you encourage your students is that, you know, they might start with one layer, but then keep applying layers and keep changing. And obviously the painting evolves or something comes out of it. And I know my ex-partner, she was a fashion design and artist, and I'd often see a painting there, and 2 days later it had changed completely. So do you want to just talk about that process? Because I think there really is a strong metaphor for life instead of focusing on perfection first time.
Yeah. And look, this is something I do talk to all of my students about because people, you know, they go about creating a painting and they think once they've got the first layer down, it's done. And they look at it and go, oh, that's not very nice. And I'm like, well, because it's just the first layer. And I'm like, we've got like at least 10 more to go, right? And they look at me like, really? And it's about applying those layers, which builds up, you know, the not just the composition, but the depth. Experience even more. So yeah, with painting, it's the same thing. Often you get more character that builds up over time. And have we still got Les, or is he gone? I don't know.
I think Les is gone. So look, I know you have a beautiful studio in Doncaster, and somehow I'm feeling that you've been led, you've been guided to run this place. Tell us a little bit, how did you find this place?
Yeah, well, I wasn't actually looking at the time, and I I remember there'd be a few nights where I'm, you know, trying to put my youngest to bed, and as she, you know, I'm stroking her hair and trying to get her to sleep, I'm on the phone with the other hand, scrolling through real estate, commercial real estate, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I'm like, then I was like, well, hang on, why am I on this website? What's going on here? And it really felt like I was guided to actually get on real estate, commercialrealestate.com. So I started looking at properties, but also thinking, what, like, am I crazy? I'm not going to be able to afford this and do this. And then I started playing with numbers and going, oh, okay, this is how much I'm paying for exhibitions and this and that. And I was like, actually, maybe we can make this work. And it also got to the point where we couldn't renovate our house unless I moved my art out because I'd taken over that. Like I'd started in the kitchen and another important factor, and it had this beautiful natural light. So, which was also really important to me. So it all kind of fell together really easily, which was nice. But I do remember coming in here and feeling like, okay, this is great, but it's just the first step because I had this grander vision. And that I can see happening down the track, absolutely. But for now, while I've, you know, still got little kids, this is a perfect space for me. It's been really great. And to be able to also have people come in and see my work and experience it in person is absolutely beautiful.
Excellent, thank you. Les, are you back?
I'm back. Yeah, who knows for
Yes.
how long though. We'll make the most of it. Joe, I know I've got a couple of pictures here. I just want to show of some of your pieces, just share a little bit so people get a bit of a feel. So there's a couple here. So
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So this is I think this is Oceanic Genesis. Um, this is quite a large piece actually. It's over 2 meters wide. It's using a lot of iridescent paints, so it really sparkles under the lights, which I love. I can't show it to you in the studio right now, but yeah, this piece is a bit of an evolution of my orb series, which is this one here behind me, where I'm just sort of playing around with different shapes. So yeah, again, sort of, I don't know. I don't like to tell people how to experience the work, but I have people tell me that sometimes they think it looks um, like, you know, like the bubbly seaweedy type. I don't know what to call it. Anyway, I don't go underwater. I've actually got a fear of going underwater, which is really strange. So
Mm.
I think that I'm painting this to somehow heal myself. I don't know.
It's a lovely piece. I'm very drawn to it, and it's obviously the orbs to me. I look at it as spirit,
Yeah.
for me. Another couple there. Do you want to share a bit about those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I don't usually go into pinks, but for this piece I did, but it was actually a completely different painting underneath this one. It was one of those times where I think I just decided that the painting didn't work. So I started to explore and play further. And this is actually where the more oval sort of shapes came from. So I actually did a couple of pieces in this really bright pink and blue. Um, yeah, which is actually, it's really lovely. I should probably revisit that. Um, and then yeah, the one on the other side is the more of an iridescent violets and golds, which is also really lovely. But I do stick to blues most of the time. Blues and greens are really my go-to colors, which make me feel really good as I'm
Mm.
painting with them.
And Joe, are you kind of just drawn to the colors, or do the colors call to you? Because obviously color in art is also healing,
Yeah,
but on the spiritual level, colors bring out
yeah.
so many different meanings for people and different
Oh,
energies.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, I don't go into color theory, but obviously blues and greens are extremely calming colors and empowering colors as well. Help with mental clarity, all that kind of thing. But I'm very drawn to those colors. And when people ask me to paint different colors, I do struggle a little bit, but I do like to test myself every now and then, have a little bit of a struggle and a bit of a play because that's where new ideas come from.
Okay. There's another one there which is a little bit different beyond the orbs. So this was another series, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a nebula series as well, and this has probably got a bit more detail in it. And I started this painting back in September last year, and it was originally going to be mostly blue, like quite a simple piece. And I started it while I was doing other commissions for other people, and then I finished my commissions for last year, and then I just sort of let myself explore this one further over December and January. And then I finally finished it. It's actually this one over here. And it's probably one of my favorites, actually. There's something about it which is just it's very three-dimensional. It really draws you in. There's a lot of detail. It's got a beautiful green iridescent shimmer which changes as you walk by it, and in different lights. So yeah, it's quite a beautiful one, that one. And it's one of those ones where I thought, you know what, as soon as I put this up on Instagram, it will sell, and it's still available, but maybe I'm too attached to it. I need to let
Maybe
it go.
maybe
That's
it's
the
all
problem.
it's all energy, isn't it? And when we do get attached to them, it
It
must
is.
must be challenging. It must know that it wants to be with you for a little while longer.
Well, maybe, but I do occasionally talk to the paintings and tell them it's time to leave the studio.
I like that because they're like your little creations. It's almost
Time
like,
to move on.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
almost like when I wrote my book, it was time to get it out there, and you have to let it go as a
yeah,
creator.
have to let
Um,
it go.
I'll let
Absolutely.
and this
Yeah.
last one, because again, this is a little bit different.
Yeah, this is actually one that I tried to replicate another painting, which you don't have a photo of here, but it was such a popular one, which I think I probably could have sold at least 20 times over. And I thought I'll try to replicate it. And this is the outcome, and it looks nothing like the other painting. So, but I still love it. I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, that's the thing with these paintings. It's funny when people come in, they say, "Do you mind if I take a photo?" And people ask me, "Are you worried about copyright?" And I say, "You know what? If I can't copy the art, good luck to someone else.
Yeah.
Because, you know, once they're done, that's it. Because it's that moment in time that cannot be replicated.
Lovely. Thank you. I think it was just nice for people to get a bit of a feel for what you do. Joe,
Yeah.
obviously being a creative, and I know many of the people here, even though we're spiritual, we are all creative at some level. I suppose it's the belief whether we have that in our gift,
Yeah.
whether we're a singer, a writer, a healer, a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your encouragement, to people listening, who may not fully believe in their creative gift or their inner gift? What might you, from your experience, share with them?
Yeah, I found personally it was challenging to really back myself. Um, it took a while, and I think it's just those little wins along the way that can really help to get that encouragement to keep going. And I was lucky that I had a lot of really supportive friends and work colleagues who would say, wow, your work's really it's really good. And have you thought about, entering this art competition or exhibiting with these people? Or so I had that support along the way. So I mean, my advice would be don't keep it to yourself. Share your gift with your friends and your family and your work colleagues and get the feedback because you might be surprised at how positive it is.
Yeah.
And even just putting things out on social media, that for me was such a huge step in the right direction because I put something up on Facebook or Instagram and people would really, engage with it and give me some positive feedback. And I'd be like, wow, really? Is it that good? So that gave me the confidence to keep going. Um, and as I say to my children all the time, practice makes better. So, and the only difference between you and someone who you aspire to be is time.
Mm.
So the more you do, the better you get. And that's all there is to it. My paintings from 10 years ago are nothing like what they are today. And so if I hadn't moved forward, there's no way that these beautiful artworks would exist
Yeah.
because I would have stopped myself. So I think it's just a matter of just one step at a time. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it also is connected to your, like you said, it's become a bit of a discipline for you where you do set that time every day. You've got that period and you just turn up at the studio and you just do what you need to. And that's hours people probably don't see of
Yeah.
accumulated practice and just creating.
Mm,
And I think that's the where it gets to when we really want to refine our
absolutely.
gift and we want to develop it is that commitment and that practice.
Mm,
So thank you for sharing. Ella, do you have another question
yeah.
there for Joe?
Now, would you like to share with us about your exhibition? I think you exhibit your paintings right now.
Yeah, so aside from my own little gallery space here, I'm just installed a show up in Watson's Creek. So that's at Gallery 765, and that's with another artist called Benny Archer. And Benny is such a beautiful soul. He reached out to me a couple of years ago, and this is the thing, just on Instagram, reached out to me and said, "Oh my gosh, your work is so beautiful. Never heard of this guy before in my life." And he said, I would love to apply resin, which is a really glossy look over, it's also like glass essentially. I want to put resin over your art, but you have to paint it differently. You have to put it on a wooden board. So anyway, that was another learning I went through. And so I've done these collaborations. So with my paintings and his applied resin, and they just are like next level amazing, like really, like I was blown away by how much of a new level it took my work to. So we've got that show opening up on Friday, and yeah, it's a beautiful gallery out in the bushland past Warrandyte. And if anyone wants to pop down, you're most welcome to. I'm going to be there, and we have wine and maybe a cheese board
Oh,
and
there
just
you
hang
got
out
me at wine.
between midday. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so between midday and 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, which would be beautiful. So if you want to come down and have a look at that, then I'd love to meet you.
Yeah, fantastic. And Joe, just another question, just before I know we're coming almost to a close, but just another question in terms
Hmm.
of obviously with creative work and art, we need to value ourselves, and we had this conversation too. But how did you come to that place
Mm,
of fully valuing your gift and being able to charge what you felt it was worth? And because, for a lot of people
hmm.
here, whether we're practitioners or healers, people often have a challenge with the
Mm.
value that they place on their gifts and their abilities. I mean, what would you have to say about
Yeah.
that? And what would be your guidance on that?
Yeah, I have this conversation with a lot of other like artists who are earlier on, and it actually sometimes have been artists for a long time, but just haven't seen their value. Because I do a lot of business coaching with artists as well. Um, and one of the hardest things is to price work. Like how does anyone determine the value of art? It's really, really hard. And you can go into very top galleries and look at art and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's worth that much. It just doesn't make any sense. So look, it's all made up, essentially. There's no right or wrong. And it's a case of people will pay what you think you're worth. So if you put yourself out there, and sometimes if you put yourself out there too cheap, they think, gosh, that's too cheap. What's wrong? Like maybe you're not any good. So I suggest put your prices up higher because it's actually going to elevate who you are and what you offer, and people want it more. So it's a bit of a psychological thing, and I remember actually putting a price on a piece of art that I was going to um, a major exhibition, and I did a painting which was the biggest I'd ever done before. And I was talking to my husband about the price. I said, oh, look, it's a big painting. What do you think? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Anyway, so I put a pretty big price on it. Well, what I thought was a big price at the time. And he's like, oh, really? Are you sure? He's like, but what if it doesn't sell? And I was like, well, I don't know. He said, but it's huge. Like we can't like keep it in the house. You have to sell it. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it a go and see what happens. And so I just sort of backed myself, and it had sold before the exhibition even opened. So, it was one of those moments where I thought, I'm glad I backed myself and I believed that it was worth that, because if I hadn't, then I may have put a price tag on it that was actually in a point where it was low that people would think that doesn't seem right because it was such a significant piece. So yeah, it's a really hard thing to get around, and you just also need to think about your customer may not be in the same economic bracket as what you are.
Mm.
So I wouldn't go out tomorrow and spend $10,000 on a painting. I probably wouldn't even spend $5,000 on a painting, but my customers do. So I need to get out of my own way and out of my, perception of things, because I'm not my customer. I
Thank
hope that
you.
makes sense.
It does make sense. And it just reminded me of when we were up in Queensland in August last year, and we walked into this shop with all these crystal bowls, and Ella saw this one bowl and we asked how much it was, and it was $45,000.
Hmm.
And we just both,
Oh,
like,
bargain.
oh, and the lady was so strong in her belief that this bowl, this crystal bowl, was worth
Yes,
every
was
dollar
worth
of
it.
that 45,000. So she wasn't
Hmm.
even going to take us laughing at
Yep.
the price. But it was like, oh, who would pay that? But obviously somebody would.
Yeah.
Somebody would have it as a centerpiece in their house or
Yes.
their. So yeah, it's nice to hear
Absolutely.
that. And it is about self-value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Ella,
Absolutely. And you got to remember there's people who have lots of money.
yeah. Ella, I've got one final
Yes, Les, and that
question.
was very unique ball. And I'm still thinking about this crystal ball. Yes, Les.
Did you have another question, Ella? Because I've got one more, I think, before we kind of wrap up. So did you have anything else for Joe?
What would you, yes, what would you advise to our audience, Joe, uh, how to move from one job to another, from job where it's toxic for them to this dream job and beautiful environment, relaxing environment. Do you have any advices for us?
Yeah, so one of the exercises that I went through personally, and what I will take a lot of other like starting artists through, is to look at what do you need financially. So when you know what your budget is and you know how much you need to make, then if you're really, really clear on that, you can start to work out, well, how can I make this work? So you need to kind of plan it, right? So that's why I did it gradually, because I thought, well, if I make X amount, that means maybe I can cut back on some hours, or maybe it was a case I could do another part-time job and then do like, so you can actually kind of just work out how do you transition from one area to another.
You know,
Um, obviously everyone's circumstances are very different. Um, the advice I would have is don't just quit your job and go, I've had enough, and try to start a new thing, because unless you're financially completely stable and you can do that, that's probably not the most sensible approach. So you just need to be very strategic, know your numbers, and go into it without having to stress every day, because there's nothing worse than worrying about when the next mortgage payment's coming up and how you're going to pay for it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and thank you for that too, because I think that's one challenge too. I've seen a lot of people in business and on the spiritual path where they are trying to be creative, but then they are worried about the money side, and that kind of
Yeah,
constrains the energy of the creator, and and then it becomes a bit of a
absolutely.
chore, and then they're
Yeah.
feeling they're having to do it. So I think that's great advice about transitioning and setting yourself up so that it can be an easy progression.
Absolutely.
Joe, we always save the best questions till last. Okay. So with this one, I mean, if you had to go back to the 6-year-old Joe, okay, and you were able to give her some profound advice for her future journey, what would you say to her? What would be the one or two things that you would bring to that 6-year-old as encouragement?
Oh gosh, it's a really big question. I would probably say, don't worry, it's all going to be fine. Follow your dream. Um, and the same advice I give to my kids, which is just, keep going, like keep mastering, keep practicing, because it's the hours that you put into something, the dedication, that is where you're going to be successful. So, and I think that, it's pretty well known that it's the people who succeed in life in a very specific kind of way are people who had such a strong passion for something when they were a child. So usually it's something that you're really passionate about from an early age that eventually you get to, or you just find it and you keep going. Yeah. So I think that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's always nice to hear, because I think all of us, and I think this relates to what Penny shared last night, that we are here on a journey to experience. The spirit is always growing and evolving. It wants to grow and evolve, but it also wants to feed its
Yeah.
passions and its love and its joy.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that in an
Mm-hmm.
easy way that, makes a difference, because we're all here to make a difference. And I think that's part of being uplifted as well. So wonderful. So before we finish up, I'm
Yeah,
just going to share a
absolutely.
couple of things, just going to put it on the screen for
Mm-hmm.
people. And so, Joe, I know you've got a few things coming up, but maybe if you just want to share, because I know you've got a couple of workshops, and you also, you have your gallery
Mm.
space too, if people want to visit. So what's the best way to connect with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few different ways. I mean, the easiest way probably is to go to my website, because it has all the information, which is just joecarroll.com.au. And also follow me on Instagram. So Joe T. Carroll on Instagram. That's where I post all my updates I'm on Instagram probably a lot, like way too much. So yeah, if you want to reach out and message me, you can do that. More than welcome for you to come. I'd love for people to come into the studio, see me at work. Although I do keep weird hours, so always check to see that I'm actually here before you come down.
And where is the
But yeah,
studio, Joe?
and if you do want to, oh, sorry, it's in Doncaster East at 861 Doncaster Road, not too far from Westfield.
Okay, fantastic. And I know you mentioning you've got this
Yeah.
like intuitive art. Tell us a bit about that, because obviously intuitive and abstract,
Yeah.
it's two different concepts. So what's your sense or your essence for this? I could even attend because it says beginners, but what's your essence for this
Yeah,
workshop?
so yeah, I created this workshop really out of, wanting to be able to share how beautiful it is to be able to let go and play with paint. And the intention isn't really to walk away with a finished piece that you love, although that would be amazing. And some people do actually walk away with something that they love, which is great. But it's really just a moment where people can feel free and expressive. And I have people who have either never picked up a paintbrush in their lives who love it, or those who may have just dabbled a little bit but don't really have much experience and they want to learn more about what materials and techniques, things like that. And I've even had very, very highly skilled artists who are trained classically, who do a lot of like photorealistic type paintings, which I could never do. Um, they come in and they love it because they're just free. Like I basically just hold the space for people to just create whatever comes through for them. So I do follow a very intuitive process. It's not really like every session's not the same. They're all different. And the energy in the room is amazing. People get really excited. I've even had one lady who came to a session and she got roped in by a friend. And I could tell at the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't think she wants to be here. And then I witnessed the most amazing moment with her where she was creating. And then she was like, just all of a sudden, the room was quiet. And all of a sudden she said, oh, I know what I'm doing with the rest of my life now. Oh my God, this is amazing. And I was like, what? Hang on, what? Hang on a second. Really? I was like really taken aback. And then I saw her 3 months later at my Sell Your Art workshop because she could not stop painting since that day. She was painting, 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 painting. And then she had the same problem I did years ago and had to start selling them. So she's now selling art, which is amazing. So I've actually seen this beautiful transformation of someone through this experience. So I just love sharing it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And so just before we kind of finish,